I'm Tom Egger, president of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis.
I'm Larry Rast. I'm the president of Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
And we are going to talk a little bit about our own paths towards ministry and experiences at the seminaries.
So I grew up in a family with a lot of pastors. My grandpa was a pastor, Alfred Rast. He had 4 sons, and 3 of them were pastors. And the one who wasn't was my dad. So we like to make the joke that it was a recessive gene and it dropped 1 generation to me. But very honestly, I mean, the idea of pursuing pastoral ministry was very natural given that situation. Pastors were around, had high respect for my uncles. They were always encouraging. Loved my grandpa, who was just a marvelous, marvelous example of what a pastor should be. And even though, at least early on in my life, it wasn't something that I was actually thinking of pursuing, it was always there as a possibility. Your experience similar or different?
Well, mine was very different because I have an older brother who is a pastor, but he and I are the first pastors that we know of in our extended family. And so for me, growing up, I was very impacted by especially 2 excellent pastors that I had at my home congregation, just in terms of loving them and loving the gospel because of their faithful ministry. But I still don't think I would have thought about being a pastor if I had not been encouraged directly, just because when you don't come from a family with church workers, it does not seem like something that real people do or normal people do, ordinary people do. But my pastor encouraged me at confirmation age, and then I also saw my older brother go off to seminary. He's 8 years older than my brother Paul, whom you know.
My classmate,
And I think those were the 2 big influences for me, seeing my brother become a pastor and then my pastor suggesting that I think about it. And he thought about it because our former pastor had encouraged him. Yeah.
My pastors didn't encourage me. No, that's saying too much. But I did have 2 really good pastors, and they too were always really encouraging, generally speaking, confirmation students to like to think about pastoral ministry. But that wasn't determinative for me in terms of my own experience. I had kind of an interesting experience. After confirmation, a couple of years after confirmation, I thought, I've only done this Lutheran thing in my life. I'm going to go visit other churches. And I did that for about 6 months. I didn't go to my church. I went to other churches.
Yeah.
And everything you can imagine, Catholic, Methodist, the whole works, Foursquare Gospel, everything. And went and heard some really dynamic preachers, heard some really boring preachers, and everything you could possibly imagine. And then came back to my congregation after that time just to see if I would hear things differently. And we had 2 pastors, and one of them was just this super dynamo pastor. I mean, he had the voice of God, was a great preacher in the whole works. And the other was a very fine preacher, but very kind of quiet and withdrawn. And so I thought, well, we'll hear, who's preaching today. We'll see how it kind of goes. And it was the more quiet, withdrawn pastor that preached that Sunday. And he distinguished law and gospel, which I didn't hear anywhere else in all of these churches I had gone to. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. That's when I decided to be a pastor.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. So I actually I wouldn't say explored, but came into a lot of contact and relationships with people from other churches and with other churches during college. Was involved with non-denominational campus fellowship ministry, things like that. And that was a time that through that experience, that was really clarifying for me in a lot of ways in terms of what is Lutheranism, why does it matter, why does gospel-centered, Christ-centered, sacramental focus of the church matter in terms of our own certainty and peace of heart and just grounding in Christ, because I saw with a lot of good friends through those years the way that bad theology has consequences in people's lives, and really does erode faith on some level.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I then went to a synodical college and went through the pre-sim program. Great experience. Ended up at Fort Wayne in the mid-'80s. In 1986 I started. Had just a marvelous experience as a residential seminarian. Learning from great professors, having time together with folks that I built lifelong relationships with from all over the place, kind of helped me expand my own horizons, not just theologically, that certainly happened, but just in terms of understanding the church.
Right.
Man, it was huge in terms of just kind of preparing me for the breadth of experience and life as a pastor.
Yeah. Going through college, not attending a synodical college, taking different ancient history and religion classes and things like that, where I had to have my guard up the whole time in significant ways. I mean, it was really a kind of an assault on some of the fundamental assumptions of Christianity in different ways. And then the difference between that and coming to seminary, where the men who were pouring into me, not just in the classroom, but like you said, conversations outside of the classroom, to learn from men who cared about the faith, who knew deeply their areas of study in terms of history and the scriptures and the teachings of the church. It was that kind of, well, the faculties of our seminaries are very important. They aren't just conveying raw information. They are embodying a confession of the faith and shaping and imprinting the future pastors. They shape me
exactly.
I'm so grateful, not just for my seminary experience, but I'm grateful to this whole collection of individuals for the way that they invested so much.
And then out of that comes your own kind of interest and expertise. You know, I came into the seminary deeply interested in New Testament. I was very good at Greek, I thought, well, that's probably what I'll emphasize. And then studied with Dr. Weinrich in early church, and I'd always had this kind of inclination towards history, and it's like, well, that sort of fits. But, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll pursue early church. But then I went off, this is what just having time and the opportunity to engage with a lot of people and to learn from them in terms of their specific gifts. I went off on this path of history of Christianity in America, and specifically American Lutheranism, that, I mean, it's defined my life, professionally speaking. And it's something that I love. I think it's the story is central to our own experience as not only as individuals, but as a corporate body. And it was utterly transformative for me, and I give thanks to God every day for that. Just to see people use their gifts and then pass those gifts to me and develop them in their own way, in my own way.
And on our campuses also, the importance of not just learning in the classroom, but worshiping God, receiving His gifts together, the place of daily worship in the shaping of a pastor, I think is so important. Our friend Shawan Trump, who works with missionaries and partner churches in Africa, he was with a group from the Malagasy Lutheran Church on our campus, showing them around about a year ago, and they worshiped in chapel with us, and then coming out of chapel there on that platform in front of our chapel, he was talking to them, and he said, when I was a student here back in the early 2000s, he said, this was my home. And he pointed to the chapel. He said, this was my home. I felt like this was, when I come back, this is the most special place on campus to me. And what a beautiful
That's a great
picture.
testimony. The classroom is central. The work you do there is absolutely critical. The libraries that we have that we've been blessed with are unbelievable, and the interaction that occurs with folks as you're looking at texts and studying particular themes and absolutely crucial. But nothing is more central than receiving the gifts of Christ from Him in the chapel, day in and day out together, and that's what again forges those relationships that here I am 40 years down the road with some of these guys that I started with, and it all finds its heart there.
To be brothers in the ministry and brothers as church leaders is important, but it's important within that framework that we're first of all brothers as children of God, and as disciples of our Lord.
Exactly.
And that really it's most clearly embodied in our time together, shoulder to shoulder in the chapel.
Those again, to have that opportunity, to have the time, and for a lot of folks, that's the one time in your life when you can
set apart
and work at these things very intentionally, at length, seriously, but also joyfully. There's nothing like it in the world. There's nothing like it in the world.
Yeah. Well, we need more students.
We do.
At our seminaries. And so thanks be to God for all the work that's being done in our synod to encourage future church workers. And just an encouragement to those who are listening to this conversation, to yourselves, encourage young people towards church work vocations. It is a rewarding, significant, joyful vocation, challenging.
Very.
But so rewarding, and the church needs pastors, the church needs deaconesses, the church needs missionaries, the church needs Lutheran school teachers. We don't train the Lutheran school teachers, but
we do get a lot of lay leaders who come through the seminary, and the Lord uses all of us. He uses those gifts, he gives each of us the unique gifts toward that end, and you'd be surprised. Well, maybe I'm not very articulate. Maybe I don't. I'm not quite sure what to say. Sure you do. Be a pastor. You'd be a good pastor. Be a deaconess. You'd be a great deaconess, teacher, whatever.
It's amazing how many people we run into at the seminary who will say, one person in my congregation or my grandmother or my pastor said to me, I think you'd be a good pastor. And that's all the encouragement they received was that one sentence. But it gets them thinking.
Gets them moving, and here they are today at the seminary, and later on they're going to be serving the Lord in very profound ways. God bless you, Tom.
Yes.
I appreciate you so much. We work together so wonderfully as the two seminaries of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We are incredibly blessed in our synod to have St. Louis and Fort Wayne. And it's great to partner with one another towards this very God-pleasing end.
Absolutely.